that's this.
It's being entertaining.
Yes. All right. Before we begin the work session, I need to let everyone know that item 4, City Hall facility discussion, has been removed from the agenda, and that council will be holding executive session immediately following the work session. So with that, we'll have a conversation about the Milwaukie Center with Kelly and Siri. And Marty and Siri. Didn't see you there for a second.
Hi, yeah, so Kelly Brooks, Assistant City Manager, and I'm really here just in an introductory capacity tonight. Your first 2 items on the work session agenda. So we have Siri Bernard here, who is the city's representative to the Community Advisory Board for Milwaukie Center, and when we were talking about our assignments for the next year to the different boards and commissions, we thought wouldn't it be great, have you come in and give us an update on what's going on with the board. And we have Marty Hanley, who's the supervisor at Milwaukie Center here to give us an update on all the great things that are happening. So thank you both for coming. And also I want to thank Siri. My first, I think, 2 weeks on the job, she reached out and said, I want to give you a tour. You need to know what this place is. And I said, yes. And so she took me out, and it was really helpful for me to get an understanding of the role of the center and all the great programs that they have there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Siri and Marty.
Thank you. I'll start.
Siri.
Okay, I am, yes, the chair of the Milwaukie Center Board. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we have going on there. I'm going to start with seniors because the Milwaukie Center was originally built for seniors and was called the Milwaukie Senior Center, in case anybody didn't know that. But it was changed over, I don't know how many years ago, a while ago, to become our community center, Milwaukie Community Center. And we just kept it at Milwaukie Center for a name. But we look at everything. But we do a lot with seniors, and that's probably, in my mind, mostly the services that we offer. And talking about the Milwaukie Center and how we're thinking about things, I'm going to start with this little blurb from AARP that tells a lot. It's gratifying to see shifts in attitudes, behaviors, and culture as more people throughout the world are challenging outdated attitudes and stereotypes and sparking new solutions that recognize the potential historic benefits of living longer. Where leaders once looked at growing aging population and saw only retirees, they're now beginning to see a new type of experienced, accomplished workforce. Where they once saw only expensive costs, they're now beginning to see an exploding consumer market that's bolstering our economy. And where they once saw only a growing pool of dependents, they're now beginning to see intergenerational communities with new and different strengths. And at the Milwaukie Center, we're doing just that. Looking at our newer seniors as a source of volunteers and donators, as well as participants. We see all the seniors as assets, as well as all Milwaukeeans. It is a community center. And as an example, I'm going to talk about some of the classes and activities that we have there. It won't take long. For our summer session, I'm using that as my example. And we have 42 health and fitness classes and dance classes weekly. We have 2 to 5 computer smartphone classes a week, depending on the season. We have 13 children's classes per week in the summer, including dance and computer classes, others too. We have 12 enrichment, art, language, and writing type of classes per week. And then we have 13 activity groups that just spring up on their own. Somebody says, oh, I love what you did there. Well, let me show you how. Pretty soon there's 5, 10 people that want to know too, and it's a class. So like ukulele is that way, wood carving, bridge, their classes, and they just do their thing. We also offer a lot of trips. We have mostly day trips are offered. A lot of them are going to different restaurants, out of the area, something they haven't seen. But we're getting a lot of other things. I myself have signed up for a trip to iFly, where you get the cylinder and you fly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a lot of people going to that next week. We have Albany Carousel Museum. We're going to Multnomah Falls, Seattle Mariners game, Mountain Railroad. We do a lot of things, and we're always up for ideas too. And I'm going to let Marty talk.
Thanks, Siri. I'm just going to pass these around. Grab one if you'd like. We put out a monthly newsletter, and there's a little update sheet about some of the recent events coming up. So Siri does a great job of touching on a big aspect of the Milwaukie Center, which is kind of fun and education and learning for people of all ages, mostly seniors. We also, a big portion of what we do is social services and helping the disadvantaged of the community, people that need help, seniors that need assistance trying to figure out how to best remain independent in their situations. One of our focuses has always been and will always be helping seniors remain independent where they want to be, staying in their house, staying in their apartments, getting the services they need to do that. So it's a challenge, but it's a great challenge, and it's a great combination of a place where people come to have fun and to engage, and also a place that reaches out to the community and really tries to help sustain folks that are struggling. One of the main ways we do this is Meals on Wheels. We do about 200 to 250 meals a day. A large portion of that is in the city of Milwaukee. In case you guys didn't know, the process for Meals on Wheels, I just want to touch on this briefly because not everybody knows, at least at the Milwaukie Center. So generally, we get a referral call. It's either from a family member, the individual, or maybe a social worker, hospital social worker. They're looking to sign up someone for Meals on Wheels, so they call one of our social workers. The social worker takes the intake, gets them set up for meals, and then usually within 2 weeks follows up with a home visit to that person. And on the home visit, one, they're checking their eligibility for the program. So for Meals on Wheels, there's no financial eligibility. It's just the inability to successfully prepare meals for oneself. So a lot of the folks are, economically disadvantaged, but there's also people that aren't. Maybe they're having a hip operation, or they're just getting to the point where they can't safely turn on a stove, they can't see well enough. Lots of different reasons to get Meals on Wheels. And then with that also assessment, they also check in with that person, and that person maybe and family members, and see what else that person may need. Maybe they need transportation help, some sort of help with their home, with their apartment. They're suffering in different ways, they're struggling in ways, and our staff tries to help them reach the resources that will help them maintain what they're after. So, and then after all that happens, we follow up. We start a case on that person, a file. We keep in touch. We build a relationship. Hopefully, they're comfortable that later in life, if they are struggling, they need help, they know where they can come to find it. So it's a comfort level there that we build with our clientele. And then every year thereafter, if they remain on the meals, then we also have another home visit where staff follows up with that person. So a lot of people are on meals for 3-4 months as they recover from an injury or a surgery. Others are on for 10, 15, 20 years as they're disabled and they need that help. So we make all our meals in the kitchen. They're all made from scratch. We have a pretty accomplished kitchen staff, and I would definitely put our meals on par or better than most other similar programs across the area. So we're real proud of what we have there. I also just wanted to touch quickly on citizen involvement at the Milwaukie Center. So Siri's our chair on our CCAB Center board. And with that, we also have subcommittees. We have a facility subcommittee, a recreation subcommittee, and a social service, nutrition, transportation subcommittee. And all those are made up of people, users of the center, volunteers, other community people, business people, and they come together and they help staff come up with ideas, give input if staff has ideas. So we don't operate in a vacuum as we operate at the community center. We have a lot of input from the community. We have a second board, which is the Friends of the Milwaukie Center board. It's a very vibrant board. They are a nonprofit. They primarily do a lot of fundraising, a lot of special events, and awareness for the Milwaukie Center. We're very fortunate to have them as well. And those boards work very well together. The CCAB is more on programs and how we do things, and the Friends is more just awareness and fundraising. So, and all that's tied together. Part of the North Clackamas Parks and Rec Board, as I'm sure you're all, our board district, as you're all aware, and we run in conjunction with their programming as well. So that's mostly what I have to say. I didn't want to get too far. I just wanted to touch on a few things. So if you guys have any questions.
Or want to tour the place.
Yeah, or have a tour.
Lunches are good.
And they have jazz music on Friday. I always wish I could go.
Yeah.
Well, here's your chance.
Well, that's that job thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's that.
I wanted to ask, so after you were having a discussion with NCPRD about SDCs, and that's not directly on point, but in the materials they gave us was sort of their capital improvement plan list, and I think it showed a $3 million upgrade to the Milwaukie Center. Are there maintenance issues and things that you're looking?
I'm not aware of a $3 million. So we've, over the last 3-4 years, have put in about $200,000 into the Milwaukie Center, mostly on trying to modernize it. It's 1979, and most of it was still 1979. So part of making it more alluring to the younger seniors and baby boomers and
New seniors
is, they don't want to come into something that seems like an institution. They want to come into something that seems like a community center. And it was really in need of a lot of updating and facelifting. And we've done a lot right now. We're finishing up the 2 main bathrooms. Very nice. And we've done flooring. We've opened up the lobby. We've done a lot of improvements like that. And every year with the Parks District, most every year there's some physical components, heaters, roofs, paint, those kind of things that we have to do. We don't have to, but we choose to do as a necessity. And then also, over the last few years, we've had the ability to do some aesthetic upgrades as well.
We still have some we'd like to do.
Yeah, there's always a list.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love a tour, but I also have a quick question. Are there, I know there are a lot of activities classes. Are there locker rooms and showers?
There are not.
No showers at all in the facility?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask about is a lot of what you were touching on in terms of the social service aspect brought to mind. There's this sort of new formula that's percolating in the metro area, these elder villages, they call them, that sort of, I know there's sort of one in East Portland, and now there's sort of meetings to sort of try to formulate one in LO and West Lynn, and I wondered if there's been any sort of talk in our part.
Actually, it's interesting you brought that up. 2 months ago, we had one of the representatives or people interested in starting a Milwaukie branch of that come and give us a presentation, give that board a presentation, and see how we might be able to be involved in that. Their idea is seniors pay a fee, and then the community kind of helps them age in place, kind of very similar to what we're trying to do. So, we're in contact. We'll definitely be a support.
I mean, I guess as I understand theirs, they also try to match people up with, people that do house chores and stuff like that, small maintenance chores.
A lot of transportation, a lot of small maintenance
pairing
chores.
People up. And actually, one of the people who's involved in the East Portland one used to work for City of Milwaukie, Joanne Herrickle. And so if you ever want a resource on how it works and what the pitfalls are.
This one? The elder
Village?
Well, they call them villages.
They're villages.
What
I think
the
it's
real,
Northwest Villages or...
But it's not really a place.
it's not a,
It's a
Oh,
reference.
facility.
I see. It's more, okay. I
it's
see.
not a facility.
Okay.
It's a
It took me a long
It's
time
a-
to figure that
gotcha.
out.
community.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a community of people who are giving skills and
I
people
see.
who are paying membership to get assistance with their services and
Okay.
stuff like that. Yeah.
So
Anyway.
she said that it takes 2 to 3 years to start one of these up.
Yeah, I don't think it starts overnight.
And so
Yeah.
this is the beginning of it. So I keep my ears open, and it should be
Right,
forming in the next few years.
right.
If I may, I think we have a great opportunity here in Milwaukee to do something along the same lines. That is with the Northwest Housing, the Milwaukie High School, and our little town, Lake Estates, which is a 55 and older place. So right there in one little space, we have small children, elderly people, and teenagers. What a great community, something we could put together there. Just seems like an opportunity we should do something with.
Yeah, it does. One of the things I wonder about, because I've heard concerns throughout the community, not concerns about the Milwaukie Center, just concerns about an issue, is that, when the time comes and we have to close our library for reconstruction, could be in the summertime, and we would be losing our cooling centers, our, cooling center. That's where a lot of people go just to get out of the heat, and sometimes, this kind of weather, just to get out of the rain too. And so I would hope that there may be some ways in which we could partner better with the Milwaukie Center to be able to have the Milwaukie Center be open for those kinds of opportunities. It's going to be a tremendous need in the community.
Do they have a lot of folks
want to make sure
the
that
library?
it's met. I think so. Yeah, I personally don't know the numbers. It's just, I've heard discussions about it and what are we going to do and where would we be able to tell those folks to go, especially, considering that these may be a lot of folks that don't have a lot of access to a variety of types of transit, and I realize that's going to be
That's the
downside. I understand that, and some of that would be, a need in evenings, as well as daytime. So there are, a couple of places, and that basically being one of them, and maybe Wichita Center being another, but in our area, there will be a need, and there is a need right now, but it's, at least being somewhat met.
That's a good idea. And we also have a need for transportation.
Need what, Sarah?
For transportation, now that they took that spur off of the...
Yeah.
So people can't get to North Clackamas Park, and they can't get to the Milwaukie Center unless they have a car.
Right.
Have you seen a drop in attendance because of that?
Well, not really. I mean, part of the analysis TriMet did, in fairness, is there was 1 to 2 riders a day.
Yeah.
I've heard from certain people that definitely the 1 to 2 riders a day. So yes, there has been some, outfall from that. Obviously not a lot, because they did their due diligence as far as the numbers of people go. It's difficult because for things like what Willow was talking about, when there's no public route access, then that's definitely unfortunate. But
And aren't we getting a whole bunch of houses right next door to...
No, in that area, there's nothing come back to us yet.
Okay.
No. But on that transit issue, I think as you guys are aware, I was very much opposed to TriMet dropping that line from, that went into the park and the Milwaukie Center. And then there's also a residential care facility just right outside of the Milwaukie Center, and I felt that was a benefit for that. However, rest of the story is, I agree with Marty. I mean, they did surveys and, folks were asked, and there were only a couple of people that really indicated that, would lose benefit if that particular bus line wasn't there. So it was pretty hard to advocate for something that the users themselves were not advocating for.
Yeah.
And so it was not as compelling an argument as what it could.
If I may, they only had 2 routes.
I know.
And they didn't fit with lunch and all of that stuff, so
the timing of it was
they only had 2 stops.
Not conducive to what was going on at the Milwaukie Center. No, we discussed that also. I agree with you.
Sorry, I always have 2 cents.
All right. Anybody else? All right, we're at our scheduled time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great to hear from you guys.
Yeah, and then you can find my contact or our staff contact in here if you have any other questions that come up.
It's been a while since we've had lunch out there. We'll have to do that again.
Yeah, we can meet there for lunch sometime.
Yeah, it's kind of you can do the hot meal. Sorry.
Okay, I have a small army for the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, let's hope.
Not an invading army.
Not an invasion? Yeah, I don't know about that.
Cruise missiles.
Hopefully not.
Wow. He's prepared.
Yeah.
What's that? You done? I'm done. Doug. No one else wants John. There.
Okay, so I'm still Kelly. Charity, and FCS consultants, John and
Doug.
Sorry. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction before they launch into the presentation, just because you all took action at the last council meeting on a resolution pertaining to this issue. I want to loop that in before we start. The first thing I would say is this is titled on the agenda as a CIP update. I think it's more of an SDC methodology update on behalf of NCPRD, of which the CIP is a component. So just know what you'll be hearing most of tonight is not details about projects. It will be the process that NCPRD has been going through to update their methodology. The action that you all took last month, or earlier this month, I can't remember which time it was, but the resolution was in support of taking a near-term step to allow funds that are raised, SDCs that are collected within a zone, to be spent in any zone. There was a change, I believe it was in 2014, that restricted funds collected in an SDC zone to only be spent within that zone. So the resolution that you all passed supported removing that restriction that's in place today. Most of what is going to be discussed tonight is the longer-term issue around updating the methodology, which is similar but different. Your action keeps the existing methodology, removes the restriction. What they're going to talk through is really related to, do you want to update that methodology? What are the implications for updating that methodology? How does it impact Milwaukie projects? So is that, before we go, I just wanted to make that connection. Do you all have any other questions for me before I turn it over? Okay. Who wants to start?
I'll get it started.
Okay.
I'll get the ball rolling and then get out of the way. Good afternoon, Mayor Gamba, council, staff. Pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Again, Scott Archer, Director of the North Clackamas Park and Recreation District. We've got a whole team here, so I think most of you by now hopefully know Catherine. Catherine Krieger is our Planning and Development Manager and is very busy with a number of projects, including some key ones with the City of Milwaukie. From the FCS group, which is our consultant, this is John Gallarducci and Doug Gabbard. They'll be doing most of the talking. And then also want to give a shout out to a couple of our staff members sort of hiding in the back there. We've got Caroline Patton, who is doer of many things for us. She's our administrative assistant. And then our fairly new, almost brand new, but not quite brand new anymore, finance manager, Liz Gomez. Liz decided it would be a great time to start a new finance management job right in the middle of budget season. It seems like a great idea. So she's getting the crash course in our budget. She's got a very strong public finance background. So anyway, we are, as Kelly said, we're in the process, the district is in the process of reviewing and updating our system development charges methodology, and we're gonna share that with you. And then of course, I'm sure you've got some questions, and we'll be happy to answer those. So I'm just going to kick it over here to Catherine to give you a little bit more information.
before we get into the real meat. So we're here to give you the update. We embarked on this project a little while ago because our previous SDC methodology was 2007. So it's good business practice to update your methodology every 8 or 10 years. Here we're about at 11, so this is a good time to be doing that. We have a steering committee we've been working with. We have 5 members. Previously, we were also working on this with the DAB before Happy Valley decided to leave the district. So we've actually had quite a few meetings. We've met 9 times. They've done a lot of work. One of the things that has been an extraordinary amount of work, as you mentioned, was this project list. And it's a list that's meant to live for a long time. Say 15 years or so. It hasn't been prioritized. We still have work to do when we move into finalizing the CIP in terms of prioritizing and understanding which comes first and second. So one thing I wanted to do is make sure you had the most recent PowerPoint, because we just had a meeting last Wednesday, so I wanted to make sure there wasn't any confusion with numbers and things, because there were a few updates since that time. So we've got the latest and greatest project list, and then tonight's PowerPoint, in case you prefer to look on paper instead of on the screen. So a couple of things that most recently the steering committee, which Councilor Parks chairs, is which methodology to select. And then the other thing is most recently we have come to realize, and I think Kelly mentioned this in her staff report, is that because of the Happy Valley lawsuit, there's a couple of things that we can't finalize right now. One is our inventory, who owns what, and the other one is the fund balance. So that's kind of a new topic that we've been talking about recently. The third thing that the steering committee has been discussing is an option to take apart the 2014 ordinance. The only thing I could add to what Kelly said was that what this would do is free up district-wide funds. It wouldn't free up all of the funds. So that's just one note.
Can you explain why we have a methodology from 2007, but we changed it in 2014 to restrict it by zone?
Well, there's, maybe these guys can answer better, but there's a methodology by which you collect funds. But then there's another ordinance, which can be changed without changing the methodology. So a few things have changed. We sunsetted a small district just recently. It was its own little island near Happy Valley. We, in 2014, basically because of Happy Valley, they really wanted to keep things separate, so it was essentially an ordinance was passed, but the underlying methodology stayed the same.
It was an amendment to our existing methodology. Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the fourth thing is that the committee did meet last Wednesday. I think, not to steal anybody's thunder, but there was an enthusiastic recommendation, unanimous recommendation, in part maybe because of the resolution you had passed earlier, but to move towards a uniform methodology, which is pretty much the highlight of the topic tonight. The way we did leave it with the steering committee is that there was some very enthusiastic, let's go get the methodology changed now. We didn't really get a chance to talk about that. I think in a discussion with Councilor Parks earlier, we thought, we really need like another half hour, an hour to get in there and talk about some of these next steps and what they mean. So that's what we plan to do, in addition to coming out to talk about our update with you and others. I've been going to neighborhood association meetings and getting feedback. So with that, turn it over to our experts.
Thank you. So the way that we've set this up, and we'll move along pretty quickly. There's a little bit of background at the beginning, some reminders of system development charge basics. We'll talk about the existing charge structure for NCPRD, and then this issue of uniform versus area-specific charges. And then Doug will summarize the calculations. We have some comparables and sort of a big picture financial plan to look at, and that will pretty much cover what we have. As far as basics go, we have a really good law in Oregon, ORS 223, 297 through 314, which gives us a really good framework for calculating system development charges, how we can spend the money, basically the rule book. So we follow that very closely, as well as what we know about case law. The basic calculation is pretty straightforward. What the law allows for are two components. The reimbursement fee on the left is a buy-in to any unused extra capacity that's available for future users. We have not found that in this case, so our focus is on the improvement fee. And the improvement fee is all about the list of projects that are planned and a portion of each of those projects which is adding capacity for growth for future users. So if you picture a long list, and it is a pretty long list, and a percentage associated with each project that tells us how much is growth related, it's the sum total of those growth related portions which becomes the basis of the improvement fee. We divide it by the expected growth that the projects will serve, and that gives us our improvement fee, and in this case that gives us our system development charge because we don't have a reimbursement fee. So this is what the current charges look like for NCPRD. There are 3 service areas. Milwaukee's in service area 1, and you see that a different charge applies in the city than applies in the UGMA. $39.85 in the city and $6,760 in the UGMA, which is also the same as in the remainder of the unincorporated portion of the district to the west of 205. So that and the UGMA charge are the same at $6,760. And then service area 3, which used to include the city of Happy Valley, is now just the unincorporated portion of the service area east of 205, $6,075, and that's per single family dwelling unit. And then $60 per employee applies throughout the district. So a new commercial development, you estimate the number of employees by the type of business and square footage, and $60 per employee applies throughout. So and we would call that an area-specific approach because the charges are different depending on where you develop in the district. We spent a lot of time on that policy issue as well as several others, but this was probably the biggest one. And as Catherine said, are unanimously recommending, that being the steering committee as well as staff, that the district move to a uniform approach in which the same charge would apply throughout the district. And then along with that would come the flexibility that the city's already acted on to spend the money according to district priorities throughout the district service area and not be constrained to specific areas where the money's collected. That gives a couple of advantages, the flexibility being one. The other one, I just lost it. What was it? What is it, Doug?
Buying power?
The buying power of money collected throughout the district.
Good teamwork.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you can see who does the heavy lifting.
I'm going to stand up if there's no objection.
Fine.
All right. So once you've made the policy decision about how you're going to handle geographical differences, the real dark arts of setting an SDC is figuring out what is that percentage of each project that you can add to your cost basis. So I'm going to show you how we do that for parks. We're going to focus on just the neighborhood parks because the story is really the same for all of these. So this is how we figure out the eligible portion of parks projects. We begin with the current inventory of 69.7 acres. That's today. I think that's meant for me, isn't it? Yeah. So 69.7 is it?
Yeah,
It's not meant to amplify.
No.
Okay. So 69.7 acres of parks today. In the planned project list, there's 71 acres that's going to be built. That's a doubling of the existing capacity for a total of 140.76 acres once everything is built. Once that's achieved, and we add the population growth that is planned during the planning period, there will be 1.2 acres of neighborhood parks per 1,000 residents. That's the level of service that will be achieved in the future with planned projects and expected growth. So far, so good?
Actually, I have a clarifying question.
Sure.
Current inventory, and I mean, so we in Milwaukie, we have several parks that we own but have no improvements. Which category are they in? Are they considered current inventory or are they considered planned projects?
So they are in the current inventory that is in the district's list of inventory.
Okay, even though they're unimproved, and so they are on the capital improvement plan for improvements. They're on this list that we just got for improvements, but they're property that's already owned.
The improvement would still be in the improved, the inventory is really, okay, I think I'm getting at your question. The inventory is really about improved park facilities.
Okay.
So that's the answer to the question.
Okay.
So a level of service of 1.2 acres per 1,000 in the future. The question is, are they achieving that today? And the answer is no, they're not. If they were achieving that today, they would have 127.53 acres of parks, of neighborhood parks, but they only have 69.7. So that means that the first 57.83 acres that get built are to cure the deficiency, the difference between these two numbers, and that can't count for SDCs. And so that only leaves the 13.23 acres, or 18.62%, that is eligible for an SDC. It's a similar story all across the categories. So it's a relatively small percentage that is actually eligible because the planned project list is so aggressive relative to the current inventory.
So why is that? That kind of doesn't make sense.
Well, that's not our call.
That's a state law thing.
No.
The deficiencies question. So, well, I guess I should be more clear. Is it that delta that is the deficiency doesn't count towards figuring out what SDCs we need in order to build the parks that will then fill that deficiency.
So maybe I should say more about that.
Okay.
What we mean doesn't count is a very ham-handed way to say it. The whole purpose of this exercise is to determine what is fair to put on the backs of developers. So if you're going to improve your level of service, if you're going to go from what you currently have to 1.2 and you're not achieving that now, developers don't have to pay for you to catch up to the level of service that you plan to be at in the future. So they would get on you if you didn't exclude that first 57.83 acres, and they would be right. Because it's not an equitable portion.
And that is illegal. That is as defined in the statute. So we cannot include curing the deficiency or raising the level of service in the system development charge. That has to be done using other funds.
So isn't the deficiency sort of just a made-up number anyway? Because this concept of we'll have a 71.06 more acres of neighborhood parks is just somebody's idea. We should have 71, right? There's not those haven't been purchased. There's not anything in reality that says there are 71.06 acres of parks.
It is or it will be an adopted plan, and the charges have to be based on an adopted plan. Does the plan have to be made up of 71 acres of parks? No, but that is or will be the adopted plan.
But do I understand correctly that if we had if we were less ambitious about what we wanted in planned projects and we had less of a sort of concept of what we want, that then we could charge higher SDCs?
Well, the eligibility of each project could be higher, would be higher, but you would not necessarily have a higher system development charge. You may or may not, because you are reducing the project costs in order. So you're shooting for a lower service level in the future. That reduces the dollars you're going to be spending to get there, which means you may likely end up with a lesser system development charge, but you could spend more of it on the projects. Yeah, a percentage on the projects.
Where does the level of service come from? That's just adopted by the board? I mean, that could be...
So this is calculated. So this is just math.
Okay.
So we look at the future population based upon growth of this plan, and then compare that to what the future inventory will be. And we said, okay, when all those things happen, you'll have 1.2 acres per thousand.
Okay.
And then we retroject that back to today and say, okay, well, if you had 1.2 today, you'd have 127 acres of neighborhood parks.
So it's two made-up numbers.
Yeah. So to the mayor's point, then
Mathematics.
instead of 71 acres, we said...
But you're guessing at what the population is going to be.
That would change...
Right, because we're looking at metro
the level of
numbers.
service, and that would change with the percentages and all of that.
It would change. It would drastically change the project list because that 70 acres is real. It is what's being added by the project list.
Yeah.
So if you couldn't just manufacture a different number without deleting projects from
Although
the
the
list.
project list had several things that either the district or the city already owns, but it also had lots of blocks of future neighborhood park, future neighborhood park, future neighborhood park. So if we didn't, so there is some room in there, right,
So we did actually calculate charges based on achieving the current level of service. We didn't bring those. The result is a lower system development charge. So, and there you have to be sure, and this we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but what you have to be sure about is that you're not building more capacity that's needed. So if you decide to shoot only for the current level of service, and I can't remember what that ratio is. It's not 1.2. Let's say it's 0.75 acres per thousand is the current level of service. You decide you're going to shoot for 0.75. If you're building in your project list more than that 0.75, so at the end of the period now you're at 1.0, the difference between 0.75 and 1.0 can't be eligible because there you're overbuilding and that can't be placed. So it is a delicate balance, and what we found is that looking at just targeting the current level of service was that the district, at least in our view, was less better off by that approach. So, and we did look at these different methods in the steering committee meetings.
And so that's the whole point of the law that we have to operate under that constrains us. That's the law that prevents us from saying, oh, we want to have all kinds of parks everywhere we turn, and we're going to make developers pay for that. Well, you can't, because there are standards of equity, and this is, believe it or not, is the most advantageous one that gets you the highest percentages that can be justified. So once you get percentages that look like this, the effect that it has is to take a project list that's that's 204 million, and reduce it down to an eligible cost basis of a little over 38 million. And so let's look at how that is calculated on a per residential equivalent basis. So that 38 million, backing out the existing fund balance of about 14.5 million, gets you 23.8 million. What we have defined as growth is really residential equivalents, because we are counting both population and employees. And so we have, because we're in the metro area, we have good data on both of those. And so we end up with a charge of $1,986 per residential population equivalent. We add in an administrative fee, which you were allowed to do under SDC law, and that calculates out to $113 per residential population equivalent, for a grand total of $2,098 per residential population equivalent. So once you have that number, now you have to figure out how many people you have at each kind of land use you're going to charge, and that's what this is. So focusing on single-family detached, which is using census data, we come up with 2.64 persons per dwelling unit. That is an SDC of $5,536 per single-family detached. We have an employee charge, also of $113 per employee. I can give you the details on how that's charged if you're interested, but it compares with a current employee charge of $60 applied uniformly throughout the district today. Speaking of comparisons, so this is where the gray, the lighter line is the level that we are proposing. We have a few comparators. Now how you feel about this slide really depends on how you look at places like Lake Oswego and West Lynn, and if you look at them with envy or with horror, that's really up to you. But you're not cracking the top tier here, either currently or with the proposed charge. So I leave you with the bad news that with all of those percentages, given the aggressive project list, we're only going to be funding 12% of the need with SDC revenue. You're still going to have to get $165.7 million from some other source if we were going to fund the whole set of requirements. And on that cheery note, we'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
I'll just add one thing real quick. Regarding the project list, so what becomes the CIP, that is developed, so that big number of this list of aspirations for the district is created through a number of different methods. One is some of it is just carried over from the existing plan that we're not completed yet, and we're going to move those forward. Some of them come from our district master plan. Some of them come from other types of community feedback and just things that we know that the community desires or needs. Specifically, some of those are things from within the city of Milwaukie, and all of this is done with staff work, but it worked through our steering committee. So this has all been vetted. In fact, the steering committee spent the better part of probably 4 90-minute meetings, I think, or something like that earlier in the process, just on getting the CIP list done, and it starts here, and believe it or not, what we're even talking about has been whittled down, or some things added, some things deleted. So just so you understand how that list is developed, it's not just throwing darts on the dartboard, but it's actually vetted through a process, and we use planning information that we have, and a variety of different ways that we have that information.
So, do you happen to know, like Oswego, Westland, Sherwood, what percentage of the need that they have for building out whatever parts they have planned their SDCs hit?
Oh, no, I don't have that at hand.
And did you compare at all their level of service, their acres per 1,000 residents?
No, did not. We provide, nothing that goes on in any other agency is
Happy Valley's the one that we do know.
well, yes, that's true.
The calculated charge, and that's because they just did a master parks plan of their own this past year, and it actually supported a system development charge of over $20,000 for a single family residence. They decided that was too big of a number, and you can adopt anything up to the calculated amount, so they adopted 7,000. I think we would find in Lake Oswego and West Lynn a higher level of service, but we can't say that with certainty. One of the issues, one of the first things that came and questions that came to our mind was why is the percent eligibility going down basically since 2007? And in a nutshell, the growth that has happened since that time has outpaced the addition of new parks to serve that growth, meaning the calculated level of service has gone down and we can't make it up with system development charges. So that's really what we're seeing here, is the percent eligibility has gone down because the calculated level of service has gone down, and now we have a deficiency to make up to get to achieve what we had hoped to achieve in 2007. That's essentially what's happening.
It just seems so.
And then,
So
I know.
It's not, I'm not saying this.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
There's a frustration here that is not it's not meant to go unused. I do have a question regarding employees. We had mentioned population. How do you determine employees?
There's a schedule that actually, depending on the commercial type of development, it projects the number of employees by 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. And so you're calculating it based on the gross floor area of the new development that equates to a number of employees or a capacity for employees, and that's how they're charged. The law precludes you from actually charging for adding employees, so that's why we make that conversion, and the charge is basically for the expected number of employees or employment capacity for that development.
So I'm just going to jump in just because I think we're eating into our next agenda item, and I don't want to disadvantage artMOB too much because I know they have a lot to share too. But is it fair to summarize at this point that there are a couple items related to the Happy Valley lawsuit, which mean that the update to the methodology that's just been described to you is not happening right this minute? That you need to resolve the Happy Valley issue in order to have your inventory complete and your fund balance issues worked out. Is that a fair synopsis?
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you, Kelly. I was actually going to mention that. So just so you know, we're just providing you with an update of where we've landed in the process. This is where this process has landed us as of today. We're not recommending moving forward right now on adopting a new fee or a new methodology. And so as Kelly said, because of the lawsuit between the district and Happy Valley, the fund balance, specifically the Zone 3 fund balance, which is the largest part of that, it's about $11.5 million, I believe, is part of the question of the lawsuit. And until we know the result of that, we don't have accurate information to move forward on the update. That will affect our methodology in some capacity, whatever the outcome of that fund balance is, whether we have all of it or some of it or whatever the case may be. And so because of that, where we're at right now is essentially we've reached a point where it's kind of as far as we can go with the methodology update. We're going to hold on that until we know more about the lawsuit, and that could be a number of months, it could be a year, it could be more, we don't know. The one thing that we do have as an opportunity, though, to consider is that item that you, as a council, acted on recently, the 2014 amendment to our methodology. We do have the opportunity to consider that. We've not presented that action that you took to our board yet, to our Board of County Commissioners, which is our NCPRD board, as you know. Where we did receive, so you've given us that recommendation, and also our SDC committee, this recent meeting gave us essentially the same recommendation. As was said, it was a very enthusiastic recommendation to move forward. So we have the opportunity to consider that and what that might mean. What we want to let you know is that's not necessarily a magic bullet to solve a bunch of funding issues, unfortunately. We cannot, if we did amend that and sort of remove that restriction, in essence, we restricted ourselves. The district at that time said, for these various reasons, mostly because of Happy Valley's request and negotiation to do so, we restricted that where you can only use the funds from within the zone. Even the district-wide component had to be restricted to the zone. That wasn't our original methodology. If we undid that, we can't take that money from behind that and say we're going to just spend any of that anywhere in the district. We would have to go to a whole new methodology of the district-wide idea that we've talked about, the uniform fee. There might, and I see that very with a lot of caution, there might be some of the district-wide fund from prior to when that was implemented, albeit it's a de minimis amount. There might be some of that available to put back into the pot of flexibility that can be decided upon through our normal budgeting and capital planning and so forth. We don't know exactly what that number is, but what I can tell you is that district-wide fee was also used historically to pay our debt on district-wide projects, specifically Hoodview. And we're going to be paying the rest of that debt off. We've closed on that whole transaction, and we're going to be paying that debt off. But we had a debt payment, and some of that debt payment was made with that fund. And so I just want to caution you that even if we go forward with that, it might help us from that point forward and give us more flexibility on the funds that we do collect, which has good possibility. But we can't really go backwards other than if there was still any amount of that district-wide component prior to adoption. I hope that makes sense. I know I'm kind of getting into, I don't want to bog down too much on that tonight, and we'd certainly be happy if you've got time constraints to come back and talk. We can work with your staff, of course, and talk more about this, but just wanted to urge that that's not an absolute magic bullet. It doesn't open up this giant pot of money to spend on projects that you're interested in us completing with you.
So the other question I had was, Milwaukee's SDC was considerably lower, and I assume that was because Milwaukie owns its parks rather than the district owning the parks. Is that,
That had to do with growth.
I think it's more related to growth.
So, oh, really?
If our experts, if I'm off base, the experts here can pull me back in, but I think it more has to do with growth. Actually, the ownership
really
issue,
speak to that one.
Yeah, the ownership issue really isn't. It's as if we're connected with that, at the hip. You're the owner, we're the manager, so we treat it as though those are our parks, and I say our as in our collective our. We're partners here. I don't think that really has much to do with that. I think it more had to do with the growth in the city limits.
Okay.
And we have some anticipated growth coming down the line, so that number is going to go up, but also just the collection rate. I think for the first time in quite a few years, we have some things on the horizon within the city limits that have the potential to generate more SDCs. So that's where some of that where that ordinance could really come into play more so as the future collection up until we adopt a new methodology, which then kind of changes it moves the goalposts again on us.
So I also have another question. As you've been thinking about this process, is there any conversation around low-income housing? Whether or not low-income housing would be, there are cities that don't charge any SDCs or some of the SDCs or portions of SDCs for toward low-income housing?
So
has that even been in the conversation?
It hasn't been very much in the conversation at the committee level, but what I can tell you is our board has that on their radar. So I believe that at such time that we would bring anything forward, that would be part of the discussion, and that's a policy decision, right? So we can adopt an SDC rate up to the amount that's legally allowable within our methodology, and then the board has the ability, and if the city had the opportunity, you do have the opportunity to weigh in on those types of things. You could certainly give us a recommendation as well, but I know that our board is having discussion around SDCs on low-income housing. Yeah.
Well, and I'm surprised you're not asking this, so I'll ask it. When you look at, was there any thought of tiering your SDCs for the single-family houses?
ADUs, you don't have an SDC on ADUs, correct? That's why I haven't brought it up. Leave that sleeping bear alone.
We did calculate one. It's and you can see it there. We looked at a number of different dwelling unit types, and based on the occupancy, we could calculate one for an ADU.
I mean, some other contexts we've talked, it seems less relevant in parks than it does for sewer lines and things like that, but it does seem like there's a difference between the demands that a 4,000 square foot house puts on than a 1,500 square foot house puts on.
800
right.
square foot house.
Yeah.
We have, we could probably talk about this all night, but what we've heard is that the data is conflicting on that. That I've heard the case made that larger homes actually may use parks less than smaller homes. And I don't know. The key, I think, from our perspective is that we would want whatever we do to have some basis in cost or demand or impact on the parks. These are rates, and they need to have that nexus to usage or demand. So if the city were to look at ways to create discounts or relief, that they should basically be bought down using funds outside of the system development charge program to keep the integrity of these as rates.
Well, we need really a bigger, longer conversation about SDCs, and I'm very curious to dig deeply into that law. I'm baffled at the different numbers up there, and baffled at even the concept of how. So I want to know more, and I want to push back. Not on you, at the state level.
Well, we'd be happy to come back and talk anytime. As far as updating the methodology, there's no urgency at this time. But I sense that there are lots of questions and potential discussion, and feel like we're kind of constrained on time. So we'll make ourselves available. I'm committing, at least at the staff, and we had these guys on the hook for one meeting with you, but we could probably figure out a way to get them back again and dig into some of those questions that you have. But we'll kind of have to talk with your staff and see how that works into your schedules, if that's what you would want to do. So we've got time. Is what
and it wouldn't necessarily have to be parks per se. Obviously, the SDCs thing is based on, it's the same kinds of calculations, whether it's sewer or water or streets or whatever. Yep. So I'm just curious to dig into the process a little bit, try and understand it.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
We'll be talking about this at least 40 cities this Friday. You're going to
the conference.
The policy. There's a policy committee there in Salem this Friday.
Yeah.
Which the development?
The community development.
I just know that I'm supposed to show up about noon, and I'll be talking about
community development. Yeah, I will be there.
Me too.
Unless you want to go down really early, we can't share a ride. So I have first the environment one, then
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, I may try to see if I can get together with my sister.
With the time constraints,
I don't think it's
is there a time limit you'd like for us to stick with? 10 minutes? Okay. All right. That's all right. Thank you for letting us talk to you today about artMOB and what we're doing here in Milwaukie. And Jordan Imlow is so kind to put together this piece. This year, we're going to be kind of just building upon what we started last year. So a lot of it will be duplication because some of our energies are directed in other projects, and also that about half the committee is new or relatively new to their roles. Speaking of last year's highlights, we had the seasonal City Hall Gallery openings that run from May through October, and then every other month we had a new opening at City Hall during our off-season. We introduced a maximum music happy hour, and that was, by all accounts, very successful.
Oh, yeah.
And we brought in some additional events to First Friday programming that hadn't been a part of our kind of portfolio of activities for Milwaukie. Up there on the upper right-hand corner, you can see the Curious Ear interactive event. Also that we expanded on our Umbrella Parade contest, as well as outreach for that. Scarecrow contest was a little bit better than it had been the previous year. And Sculpture Garden, we had excellent results to our call for sculpture this last year, and we expect to have an even more dynamic response to this year's call. And we'll also be putting in a new sculpture where Cherish was. So this year we'll be putting in 4 rather than 3. Messaging, that was an issue that we had from the prior year, and a focus for the committee was to be consistent in our messaging and in our outreach. I think we were successful in that. Whenever I go out into the community, people are familiar with the Arts Committee here in Milwaukie, but also in the greater metro area. Awareness extends to that idea. We've done a lot of outreach to agencies, organizations, and businesses that directly relate to artists and helping to bring them into Milwaukie. Artists have told us that this is a place that they would like to develop as a cultural hub, along with our goals stated last year to develop as a cultural hub for the area. The sustainable funding stream is for development that is capital projects, but it doesn't apply to new buildings from private developers. This is an area that we want to develop in the next year, and that's part of our 2018 strategic plan. The messaging, one of the things that we decided in a very recent meeting was to shift from being referred to as artMOB exclusively to Milwaukie Arts Committee, also known as artMOB, because in some of our correspondence and interactions, people were not really clear that it was artMOB. They thought it was artMOM or art something else. They weren't quite following that. So by saying Milwaukie Arts Committee, also known as artMOB, there may be a better retention. The media that we have going out will start reflecting that in digital media as well as print media and interaction with publications, radio, etc. We want to engage the residents this year a little more than we did last year. Last year we were looking at engaging with businesses and organizations. This year we want to go out and meet with the community a lot more, bring them into our events. Last year we were successful in developing probably a doubling of attendance in our events, but not a lot of direct interaction with the residents other than at City Hall Gallery. So we want to go out into the community during our events and get to know them, individually, and bring businesses on board to partner with, which we've been developing for the last few years. We do have arts organizations that are aware of us, and we want to build on that this year. The awareness, I think that that goes hand in hand with messaging and our ambassadorship out to other communities and within our own. We'll just hope to develop on that again this year. We've made some changes to our web and social media presence, and we'll be implementing that before we launch next week, or well, 2 weeks, 2 weeks from now, so that that stays consistent. Sarah Bagley is lead on that and doing a great job on that. And that last piece is what I already addressed with our name change. This section here, our identity, this was partly drawn from what the community response was, what they would like to see here in Milwaukee. A lot of one-on-one discussion from committee members, but also from stakeholders in the community coming to members of artMOB and saying that this is what they wanted to develop as well. We're going to continue to select and curate art installations as we've done, manage the sculpture garden, develop murals. We have a little change on our murals that we're kind of excited about. Partnering with businesses for First Friday came into play when First Friday just had a recent change. We had already built some inroads there, and we were able to develop on those.
Can you talk about what you're excited about?
Yeah. One more thing. This year we're going to support live performance art. We haven't had the capacity to do that, so that will be a focus this year. On the murals, Chris Haberman mentioned over a year ago the idea of these mini murals, that maybe we would put them along the fence lines for the construction. Yeah, but Portland Waldorf School during our season. But with all this construction, there's a lot of misdirection from pedestrian traffic and kind of, ugly green fences. So we're starting a mini mural program that each month will bring in different artists to do a mural, and we'll hang it on fences that will lead towards downtown from the Max line, helping to guide traffic into where all of the activities are. That's our intention. We're going to figure it out and go from there.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And we can keep them. We can bid them off. We can do all kinds of things that we can't do with a permanent mural. So it should be pretty easy to do, but it will be a learning process a little bit. We'll figure it out, as we often do. And funding. This is a challenge, definitely. We're hoping to build on the commissions, which was a great contributor compared to the year prior. We made significantly more sales and had an uptick in our percentage that goes to artMOB. It's still a small amount of money when it comes to actually making changes, so those help with our events and things. But as we move forward into the next few years, we would like to see something that is a reliable funding stream that allows us to build on the excitement and the creativity of this community. Part of it's business and community partnerships. Part of it is grant writing, which we haven't really focused on in the past. As all of this development around here kind of slows our progress next year, that'll be a great year to really focus on our grant writing and seeking out sources. There was something else on funding. And going back to the earlier slide, mentioning that we want to see about the potential of allowing a percentage of art to come from private development as well as our public development. So that'll take a while, but if we start it now, then by 2020 we'll have a good pathway forward. And this is our schedule for this year. We see some of the repeats that have been very successful. Illustrators Show started 3 years ago. Little by Little was last year. That was really great success, building bridges between communities, bringing a lot of artists, a lot of foot traffic to Milwaukee that a lot of people had never come down here, and now Milwaukee's definitely on the map for a a lot of them. Carve Group Show, that is the Creative Arts at Rosevilla. They're going to do art shows, guest artists, build an arts incubator building as well. So they want to partner with us to do a show here. We'll do partnerships with them there, a way to build community with their residents there that sometimes can't get out. They'll shuttle them to Milwaukie on the bus and back during our events. The next one, A to Z, Art to End Alzheimer's, is something I think's been here since I've been here, and is always successfully executed. A lot of sales that go to Alzheimer's, but also it's really a great opportunity to build awareness in the community to those issues. September we'll have a new thing, and it's a graffiti art show, and this was an intentional focus to draw in younger crowds because we haven't really been able to engage with maybe our mid-20s and younger crowds. I went to a lot of graffiti shows the last 8 months and met with curators. Chris Haberman also knows a bunch of them, and saw the potential for that energy to be here. So we're going to give it a try, see if that community likes it. And the next one is also new, Contemporary Abstracts. And I've brought in at least 4, but maybe 6 really great abstract artists, and they're excited to show at City Hall. And they'll have a diverse set of abstracts for people to analyze and understand. And we may have artist talks and engagement there. We'll see how construction impairs people coming into town at that time. And then all together now is a new way to look at our holiday season without focusing on gifts, but smaller, more budget-friendly pieces throughout those 2 months. So they could be for holidays, but they're really just a show of more accessible pieces, especially after the contemporary abstract, which won't necessarily be accessible. Let's see, artist receptions, mini murals, that'll go through our season. Little by little, Maximum Music Happy Hour is on tap again. Sculpture Garden will be in September. It'll have 4 sculptures. Our Umbrella Parade, we hope will even amplify more than it did last year. And Winter Solstice Fire Pits is something we're currently working on, but we may be able to get some really beautiful fire pits, maybe temporary or maybe permanent for the riverfront. So more on that when we get there. Okay. All right.
You guys are busy.
So I'm maybe speaking out of turn, so apologies if I am. There's a development in town that you guys are working with in order to try and support art at a private location. And I believe that there's also a contribution coming back to you through that process, or back to artMOB. Is that the Axel? Are you guys doing anything with Axel Tree?
Oh, yes. I thought you were talking about something.
No, that's great. So can you just talk about that a little bit? And
well, right now that is with Haberman and Jordan, because there's a legal question. It is whether or not artMOB can receive our percentage of the budget for our services to that, because the way the mural code is written. Is it a mural code? But the way it's written 2 places in the code, and my understanding is different from the company's understanding. So we're kind of in limbo right now till somebody tells us exactly what that means. But basically, they say it says that they can't pay for that mural to be here to artMOB, but what it appears to say to me is that someone else cannot pay them to put a mural here, right?
That's what it was meant to say.
Okay, so that argument, and because it's in 2 places, maybe it's meant to be this like reiteration of the same statement, or maybe it's supposed to mean something different. But if we're unable to receive funding from private development that uses the resources of artMOB, that's really
so
uncompetitive.
Is we can fix it.
Okay.
So what you're talking about is city code. So we'll be in touch after this this is an opportunity just to council for us to have partnerships and get more art into town. It's really a great thing that we have a for-profit organization that's interested in getting more art into town and that they want to partner with our artMOB in order to do it. So we just need to figure that out, but we will. We'll work with you on that right now. And actually, we're putting a package through our code amendments for cleanup, and if council's okay with it, we'll add this into the cleanup for this next month or two.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Has the lawyer been consulted?
The lawyer's sitting in the back of the room.
Well, I don't mean necessarily Tim himself, but has somebody at the firm been consulted on that interpretation?
It hasn't reached that level yet. I think they were just trying to get some, more understanding on
because as I recall, part of that language is about keeping advertising out. Yeah. So Coca-Cola can't pay somebody to put this on their building, and there were the 2 tracks for murals, so I wonder if they're kind of cherry picking language.
That's what it kind of seemed more like. It was sort of or maybe mixing the 2 pieces.
Yeah.
We'll find a solution.
Okay, great.
You guys do such a great job.
Thank you.
It's nice to end on that.
Well, we're all looking forward, I think, to the start of First Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Which is only 2 weeks away. 2 weeks from Friday.
Yeah. Our first one's always a little slow. The weather's not great. People haven't quite gotten into the flow of it, but it's a way for us to get back up and running, and it's always fun. Every one of them.
Well, and I just want to call something out about artMOB that I really appreciated. The number of volunteer hours that the volunteers associated with this board put into doing things for the city is exceptional, and it goes beyond anything else I've seen anywhere.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the truly countless hours that you guys put in, and the amount of dedication you have given to making this a desirable place to be. And we couldn't do it without you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. So, council will now meet in executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning legal rights and duties regarding current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. I'll let you know that.
And actually, we're just going to have to take people.